to move the motion?
I move, and Cian, I'm sharing with Deputy Collins and Deputy O'Sullivan.
Right. Agreed.
Thanks.
Agreed.
Thanks, Cian. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to bring forward, on behalf of my independent colleagues, our motion on homelessness, which I think we put on the floor of the Dáil last December. Day in, day out, everybody in this chamber knows we're contacted by upset constituents at the ends of their tether, either trying to look for HAP properties, being given notices to quit because of sale or refurbishment of a property, and people living in substandard accommodation, people sleeping in their cars, in tents, Minister, mothers desperately upset at how their children are reacting to the uncertainty of homeless accommodation, people trying to get deposits together for mortgages, people needing urgent housing adaptation. The list goes on and on. I know, Minister, you know this just as well as I do. It's endless and it's exhausting for citizens in this situation. The majority of individuals and families entering homeless services, of course, are coming directly from the private rented sector, having been evicted. And we don't even know how many new homes will be coming online and ready for move in each quarter, Minister, despite your comments, I think, earlier today. We can only say to families with children in hotel rooms for over perhaps 2.5 years that they should be getting close to move out, or close to what Fingal County Council calls the offer zone, because it's rare that families will be in emergency accommodation for 3 years or more. We also have no information or figures on the current time periods families have to spend in hubs, such as the hubs at Greencastle Road and St Lawrence Road in my own constituency in Dublin Bay North. Now, I don't know how many more times, Lascan, and how many more ways myself and opposition deputies, excluding, of course, your coalition partners, Fianna Fáil, how many more times we have to bring forward options and solutions to this government to address the housing and homeless crisis. Yes, there are some bills happening, but in very small numbers, and mainly market for profit units with little or no social housing units. And yes, of course, Fine Gael keeps trotting out the failing but glossy Rebuilding Ireland strategy, which places most of the so-called solutions into the broken private rental market. But a wide spectrum of Irish society is totally fed up with the tortuously slow response to the citizens and families enduring homelessness, those facing eviction, and to the tens of thousands on housing waiting lists around this country. Indeed, the success of the Raise the Roof movement showed us that almost every sector of Irish society wants and needs change. That's why our motion calls on your Fine Gael government, propped up of course by Fianna Fáil, to immediately declare a housing emergency and implement the necessary emergency measures to urgently address this crisis. We believe a key element of those emergency measures should be an urgent return to direct build by the local authorities, to support them either individually or regionally to develop and build out their own land banks to deliver an adequate stream of social and affordable housing. That direct build programme in the 4 Dublin local authorities, I believe, Minister, should be managed by a Dublin Region Housing Executive, and I explained the reasons for that to you before, because of the problems in particular that Dublin City has. Our motion also commits the government to holding a referendum to place the right to housing, the right to shelter, in the Irish Constitution alongside the local and European elections in May 2019, to give people a vote on this in a couple of months' time and see what the people think. And your excuse in the amendment, Minister, that you can't do it is frankly pathetic, that couldn't be done. We're also calling on the government to commit to rehousing families who have been in emergency homeless accommodation, including hubs, for 18 months or more by the end of Q1 2019 and no later. The government should also commit to rehousing all other families experiencing homelessness by the end of Q2 2019, and to limit the use of hubs and emergency accommodation for families with children to 3 months maximum. When the hub on Greencastle Road in Coolock, Minister, for example, started, Salvation Army told me that no family would be there for more than 3 months. But again, this is another promise that just hasn't happened. We're also asking for increased supports to schools in areas with large populations of homeless families. We come across that week in, week out, again, when we talk to children who are homeless. Provide free counselling to all families and children experiencing homelessness, should they wish to avail of the service, and to increase the number of available emergency beds and single rooms in dry hostels, and in particular to extend the Housing First programme by doubling all targets in the Housing First National Implementation Plan down to 2021. And at the end of December, of course, during the week of the 24th to the 30th, Christmas time, Minister, and asked you that question, I think, in housing questions. According to the official stats by your department, there were 3,559 homeless children in emergency accommodation managed by local authorities across the country. And that's a really shocking and shameful figure, that people, these children woke up in Christmas Day in overcrowded homeless accommodation. Now, at the start of the year, you gave me replies, of course, that the number of families in direct provision centres, about the number of families in direct provision centre, I was told that in 2016 there were 899 parents and 1,219 children in direct provision. I also asked your colleague, Minister Catherine Sapone, to provide the numbers of parents and children in domestic violence refuges who are ready to move out of supported accommodation but who are awaiting appropriate accommodation, appropriate housing. TUSLA were unable to provide the numbers, Minister, for 2017-2018, but did provide figures for 2015 and 16, which showed that there were 736 adults and 2,463 dependent children in refuges in 2015 and 1,520 adults and 2,170 dependent children in 2016. So based on these TUSLA figures, I think we can assume there are at least 2,000 children in domestic violence refuges, almost 4,000 official homeless figures, another 1,600 in direct provision. So the number of homeless children we're talking about, Minister, in your administration on your watch is at least 8,000, which again is a statistic which is unbelievable. Most frustrating aspect I find, I think all the deputies here in the opposition side of the House, we find, Ministers, we can't trust the figures that you've given us in the past in relation to the new homes build. Last year, June, for example, you revealed you were overestimating the new build figures between 2011 and 2017 by over 30,000. And of course, you were saying that around 85,000 homes were built, whereas the CSO figure put it at 53,500. The housing crisis, of course, is most acute in the Dublin City Council region I mostly represent. We've had a miserable housing output over the last number of years. Astonishingly, in the City Council in 2019, direct social output is expected to be lower than 2018. You have the figures. The February report of the Dublin City Council Housing Manager shows that in 2019 only 187 homes are expected to be built directly by DCC, as against 247 in 2018. Only 170 units are to be leased or acquired in 2019, and the voids restored will also fall. So in total, DCC housing output will increase from 5,565 in 2018 to 5,957 in 2019, but 3,000 of those, of course, are HAP tenancies, Minister. Fingal County, of course, it's great at sending around press releases, but its output from 2015-2017, I also represent, as you know, a portion of Fingal, has been very, very disappointing. The CEO's housing report on February 11th, just a week ago, shows that only 416 social housing units were delivered in 2018, comprising of Fingal direct build, approved housing bodies, Part 5 and voids. And once again, Minister, the vast bulk of what Fingal County Council, their housing manager, likes to call, and I quote, housing solutions, 1,243 units out of 1,916 social housing units, they were simply HAP and RAS tenancy. So everything again is planned for the early 2020s and so on. The constant backdrop, last can, to the suffering of families and individuals on homeless and housing lists, of course, is the ruthless Irish property market. Almost all the families, as I've said earlier, I've met going into homelessness were evicted by landlords and their agents. The Q4 Daft.ie rental price report again shows the remorseless determination by landlords and estate agents to maximise housing market profits and the inefficacy of your so-called rent caps. And we all voted here, as you know, for a 3-year rent freeze, Minister. Dublin rents, of course, rose by almost 9% in 2018 and are now almost 40% above the pre-crash peak. And I noted one of my old economics teachers and your former Taoiseach, Gareth Fitzgerald, the rate of increase is falling. The rate of increase is falling, but it's actually still 10%. Galway rents, of course, rose 13%. In the same period, Cork rose 11%. Limerick and Waterford were 16 and 16.7% respectively higher than a year ago. But the Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil government, I believe, are in thrall, as always, to the market property sector and the country's landlords. You have steadfastly refused to impose the statutory rent freeze for several years, which is now urgently necessary. So last month, a couple of months ago, Minister, myself and my independent colleagues here with me, we submitted this motion asking you, noting the increase, constantly, relentlessly increase in homeless figures, despite the small reductions, the recategorisation by yourself and so on, that action would be taken for the children and families living in suitable overcrowded accommodation and couch surfing and all the other measures by which families try to maintain their homeless, try to get a homeless situation for them, a house for themselves. And I believe, as I said, the majority of the public believe that housing is a human right which should be enshrined in the Constitution. Some people say it's anterior to positive law. It's a natural right that doesn't have to be directly in the Constitution. I believe that's wrong. I think that we do need to actually specify it. So I think there are umpteen reports from civil society groups, Minister, in this sector on how damaging homelessness is for children, how their growth nutrition is adversely affected, how their mental health is affected, and yet you've sat back and allowed child homelessness to constantly curb. I think the time for Fine Gael's spin, it has long passed. We need now emergency action to address homelessness along the lines of the motion before us here today. And before it's too late, and before you're removed from office in the general election, Minister, I still urge you to take action.